Hello Twitch and welcome back to our cooperative world building experience extravaganza. Yes, I am Roospliz and you're joining me for session 2 of this little mini series where we're going to work together to create a D&D campaign from scratch. Yes, we are. Last week we covered religion. We had a little bit of fun creating a pantheon of gods for our players and NPCs to interact with, worship, not believe in, be agnostic of. And this week we're going to delve a little bit deeper into our world by creating a few societies for our players to interact with. So let's jump straight into the fun, shall we? Willkommen. Hello. Thank you all for joining as always. I've had a big thank you to a few people follow in the interim since last week. Excuse me while I sip my coffee. Welcome back. How excited? How are we all feeling? Session two, gang. So we're back. We are back. Whoop whoop, indeed. So today's the day. We're going to talk about society. So last week, if you all remember, and I'm not actually saying this for the people who do remember. That's a clever way of talking about it so that people who weren't here can be in on what happened. See? So if you remember last week, we talked about religion and we've developed a pantheon of gods. And we've obviously decided the Lusty Dragonborn Maid is going to be a piece of fiction that features heavily in our world. And I thought to start today, if anyone's got any ideas for a few names for any of these deities, then we could just cover a couple of those just as a little bit of a primer to get us warmed up, and then we can get into the meaty subject that's society. So just a little society. So just a little heads up. When we're building our D&D world, society is Colin. We can call him Colin for sure. When we're building our D&D worlds, society is going to play quite a heavy part in the way our players interact with different environments, right? So if we create an environment that's particularly hostile towards some other party, then they're going to react in a way that befits that. Okay, so we don't need to go into great detail to decide exactly how all of our different societies are, like on a microscopic level. We can have like an overview, right? And a lot of what we're going to be doing in other sessions is part of this same idea that we don't want to build ourselves a box to DM in. We want to build like a wireframe that we can use in games and we can adapt in sessions. Like the more room you give yourself to adapt to what's going on, the easier job you're going to have as a DM. So we're gonna lay out like it's a balancing act where you wanna lay out as much detail as you can ahead of time, so you're not thinking too much on the spot about like the broader details, right? But giving yourself enough wiggle room that when you're confronted with a question, you don't have to remember what you decided earlier on. You just, if you have an idea in your head of what the overall societal structure is like, then you should be able to think on the fly and come up with like a reasonable answer on the spot. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. And we did a very similar thing last week when we were looking at religions. We've got our list of deities up in the top, and we've written like a couple of sentences, like not even a couple of sentences, like a sentence or two, or just a list of attributes that we've come up with, and they should inform us of what that deity is and what they represent without constricting ourselves. Okay, so that's kind of a theme of what we're going to be going for throughout the series. And I find that when you're looking at larger topics like religion and society, the more broad you are, the easier you're going to find it, because your players aren't necessarily going to want to immediately ask like the nitty gritty questions about your gods and so forth. But as your players settle into the game, they're gonna become more involved with this kind of stuff. They're not going to want to know on day one. You're asking them to choose a class and a race and a backstory and stuff, and they're not necessarily going to want to know everything about everything, right? So with that in mind, I think that I just wanted to cover that at the start because I think it's an important part of what we're doing here. Is I don't want to forget that one of the main purposes of what we're doing is to try and help everyone get better at dungeon mastering, and that is a hot tip for you. It's a hot take for you about the process and how I use the process. So Prince Albert Colin. So I don't really want to I don't want to go down this list and just sort of force an answer one at a time. I just sort of have I wanted to open it up to people in chat that if there is one of these gods that they specifically have an idea for, that they can name them. Like I know we had our gnome and halfling gods that were once a single deity that has now been split into two. I think it was Rob was quite keen on having it resemble Loki in some way, but there's two of them now. So now what? Like we've got Loki and Loka written down, right? But is that what we want to go with? And this isn't we don't need to fill these out now. I just wanted to ask if anyone's thought about it over the week, and has anything that they want to chuck out there, because your participation is important to this process. Otherwise, it's just me sitting and creating a D&D campaign, right? We're doing it together, and I want everyone to stamp their name on it and stuff and a deck. So how about let's go Anthonius, right? And Decrates. One's Rocco, one's Rico. Well, I mean, definitely on deck. All right, okay, good. That's. I don't want to mediate disputes. There'll come a time for that. If there's ever a time where we've got 100 people in chat, and there will be arguments and stuff. And I don't want to have to deal with that today. But definitely on deck like that. Are we happy with me medievalizing? Not medievalizing. Decrates is definitely not. We're happy with me fantasying up the names as but one should be called Rocker. Which one? Why do you want to call one Rocker? Fine. Which one do you want to call Rocker? I feel like Rocker could be our fall. We had our Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. God of Smells, yeah. I know what you're trying to do to me. I know, and that's why I said the turtle one, because they might live in the sewers, but it's only a smell. That's the Antonius and Declanian. There we go. I like that. Where are we putting this so I can see stuff? Antonius and Declanian. Oh, I've already got Antonius. I'm gonna overrule Antonius and go with Antonius, and we'll keep Declanian. God of Smells. God of Smells. Rocker. Declanian. Sorry. Total. Oh God, where have I written? There we go. I shouldn't have. What I've done here though was daft because Clanian is the Clanian is our halfling, right? And this works out the right way as well. And Antonius is the less responsible one. Overall, so works for the law. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So it's totally Rocco the totally. And we don't this as well. We don't have to. Our gods don't have to resemble the like the race that they're most commonly affiliated with. It doesn't mean that Rocco has to look like a turtle, right? Has anyone got any anything they want to interject with? Because I'm happy to leave it. Again, I didn't do this week, and I fully intend to. I'm gonna. This is a Google Doc, right? I'm gonna set it up so that it's readable by anyone. So like we can leave the names like unfilled and just have like a little bit of a Q&A thing at the beginning of every session where if anyone's got anything they want to, because it's not just going to be gods, right? We're going to have at the end of this session we're going to have towns and cities and things that want names as well, and the region that the map is set in and the world and everything. There's going to be so many things that need names, and thinking of names on your own is like can be quite tedious. So I want to open that up to people. If I make the document live this week and then people can look at it, like I'll provide a link next week and people can look at it in their own time if they wanted to, and you'd be able to at the beginning of every session just sort of go, I've got a name for this town and I want to name it after myself, right? And that's if people can do that. You know, if general consensus is it's a good name, then we can go wild, right? But we're not going to. Yeah, that's that. So I'm guessing no one's got anything else to chuck in. So let's move on. Let's rock on and start today's hot topic, which is society. So something I want to mention before we get too deep is that at some point in this process we're going to want to look at when we start to look at the campaign itself rather than the world that we're building for it, we're going to want to think about like a central tension for the campaign, right? So to have the idea to have one prominent sort of storyline that flows through the center of everything that happens. And quite often you'll find that because of the nature of essential tension, right, is that it's got to be like overarching, right? It tends to be like it's a big deal. So you'll find a lot of the time that when you're thinking of things that could potentially be a central tension, it's very natural for you to want the central tension to involve like societal issues or like religious issues or something of that ilk, because the idea of warring nations, for instance, as a central tension is like immediately that idea gives you so much room to play with, right? That if we have two warring factions, that too much joy is a central tension. That's good. That could be, yeah. That's it's a weird one, but yeah. So we're going to want to think about a central tension, and we don't need to think about that now, but it's useful to have at the back of your minds that if we choose to have our society be very like well organized and to have like very little conflict, that's fine. But that does mean that when we come to creating our central tension, that perhaps like we've ruled that out for instance, right? So we want to be as open as possible, right? There's nothing wrong with creating a world where there's no war, but if that is the case, then we're not going to be able to include that kind of conflict in our storyline. So it's not something that we need to address right now, but we want to keep it in the back of our minds that having little disputes here and there between different cities and things is going to help us down the line when we're thinking of stories. And it's going to create a more fleshed out and more interesting environment for your players to like explore and adapt to. If you find that, for instance, when you're traveling from one city to another, you find it very difficult to get into the city because they're worried that you're smuggling in like refugees or whatever, that kind of thing. It's going to make a much more interesting play experience, and it's those kind of things that help the world to feel real when your players are in it. If in the back of your mind, you know that that's the case. When your players travel from one city to another for the first time, they're instantly hit with this new experience that they're not used to, and you're informing them potentially of a higher something that's at play in the world at large, right? The reason that they can't get into the city is because there's a conflict between those two nations, and they don't want you smuggling like war criminals in or whatever. You know, that the possibilities are endless, but we don't want to create like a boring flat world where like one city might as well be the next, right? So we've got a map. We've got a map here. We're going to use this one because it's already made. We don't have to keep any of the names on the map, which you probably can't read depending on how large your screen size is anyway. So we have opportunities to name things as well here, and you can, if you'd like to, you can be informed by each of the settlements has a little icon, which goes sort of to indicate what originally, when I first drawn this map, goes to indicate what the settlement was known for. But we don't have to use those, so just be aware they're there. They can inform your decisions if you want them to. They can be replaced if you don't. So what I'd like to do to start off with is there's a few like overarching ideas that I want to nail down first, because our world can be one of many varieties of fantasy world. What am I trying to say? So one of the things I want to address early on is how is our society structured? Like, is it a complete melting pot where every city has every race in it, or are we segregated more? Because that's going to help. That's immediately going to make a massive difference to how everything's laid out in our world. So I want to quickly address that first, and then address kind of what authoritative figure, like what authoritative structure we have in the world. Like, is it a feudal, right? Is it a kingdom? Are there fiefdoms and what have you? So, because that's also going to inform what's going on, like between the cities and the towns immediately. So once we've decided on a couple of those things, then we're gonna, some areas are mixed, but there should be race specific towns. Yeah, that's kind of, I tend to go with that for better or worse, because like we talked a lot last week about how things that are kind of tropey aren't necessarily bad, as long as you don't sort of overstep the mark. Like creating scenarios that people are going to be accustomed to in a way will help your players to adapt to the game quicker, because they're seeing things. You're not, everything you're telling them about the world you've created isn't new to them. You know, like the classic dwarves live under mountains kind of deal, right? If you don't reinvent dwarves at the start of the game, you can tell people that they're dwarves and they live under mountains, and they know instinctively that they're mine and they're stubborn, and you know, these kind of things can help them to adapt to the world easier, because everything else you're telling them is like a barrage of information. So if the tropey things that help them pick things up quicker aren't necessarily a bad thing. And I often tend to go with like a fairly structured world where like the dwarves live in cities under the mountains, but that doesn't mean you won't find some halflings that live there, right? It's not because you're not welcome, it's just because the races will tend to stick to their own more frequently because they like what they used to, right? So like you'll have, and I tend to have a lot of the action normally take place in more human settlements, because I find human settlements again are easier for your players to it's easier for players to imagine what a medieval town will look like, right? But it's a medieval town and there's like an elvish quarter where there's a lot of elves that live there, and the dwarves come through to trade quite often, right? It makes it easier for players to adapt at the start, and by having a dwarvish stronghold nearby that they can explore when they're into the game and have like got more comfortable. Because remember, we might have new players in our party, right? So having those places that are less comfortable, I guess, to them close by, then they have the option to explore those when they're comfortable with the basic mechanics of the game. So I've got 3 cities separated by mountains. Are separate on the left. Yeah. So like that's the next thing, right? So once we've sort of agreed on that, we don't want to write an entire backstory and like a ruling structure and stuff for every single one of these settlements, because at the start of our campaign, our players are going to visit like one of them. They're going to mainly be in one, and then they're going to expand slowly outwards, right? And we had this last week when we were looking at religion, where when we were looking at a human deity, we put quite a lot of effort into it, and then we got towards the bottom of the list, and we were looking at Aarakocra and how we wanted to put more effort into the areas that we knew we were gonna spend more time in game, right? So there's no sense in like writing a massive history for all these places. Like I said earlier, we want to create like a wireframe, and it's important to focus more of our attention at the center of that frame, the place where we know we're going to start, and we want to have an idea of what's going on over here, because the players might get there one day. But as a DM, you should have more warning that your players are going to sort of travel that far, and we can have them go anywhere on the map. So let's not spend too much time focusing on the places that they might not go to, I guess. So we want to, I think, choose a part of this map where we want everything to start, and it could be over these 3 cities and towns that are cut off on the west and the western side of the map, right? Or we can have the one in the middle at the bottom, or I would tend to like choose one in the center, just because it gives you more room to play. But because obviously, if we as an example, if we chose the city that's on the far right of the map on the east, you then give your players less options where to go next. They have to go west if they want to leave, right? Or we have to draw another map, which we don't want to force ourselves to do. We're willing to do because we're a good DM, but if we can avoid that, let's. How many square inches do you envisage the world as? That's a question for you, I think. I think you get to decide that. And that's the greatest thing about this process, is I can palm questions like that off back on you. It's a collaborative process. So Pontus gets to decide how large the world is. So another point to cover quickly at the start is the map we've got here is very clearly like a regional one. So again, because it's not waterlocked, right? We have land to the east and the north of what we have here. It suggests that there's a lot more to the world as a whole, or to the continent, right? So we can also think about what's beyond the borders of here, right? So it's almost like we're looking at like a quadrant, because of the nature of, but the world or the continent that we're on can be as large as, or as small as we want it to be. So I want to cover like a starting the port town and so always on a transport ship. I like that. See, I like that. I like that a lot. See, this stuff just writes itself. We've already written a part of our campaign now, because we've already decided how our players are going to arrive in the world. So what sort of societal structure do we want to lead with? Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like it too. Do we want an empire? Do we want a kingdom? Do we want separate kingdoms for our separate races that are currently at peace? Or I do this no way. This is, see, we could just get carried away now and write the whole thing. This is the part, yeah. This is the part that I love, because once ideas start to flow, like you just get carried away and you turn into Tolkien immediately. Communism, right? Interesting. Communism. How would a communist D&D campaign work? It'd be quite fun to like explore that. I don't think it's necessarily for potential first time DMs though. I think unless anyone's got any objections, I think we'll go with like a classic empire, right? And it's easy to understand. It helps us integrate our races better, right? Because the empire can be split into different like factions, and we can have all of the races have their own, not kingdom, but their own like fiefdoms, and they're ruled over by a starving the wealth out of the country region. I think empire trying to expunge a monarchy. Like that. So if we go with so how about if people want to focus on an empire, right, and we've got this idea of trying to expunge a monarchy, why don't we? How about we set our campaign amongst an empire that is almost entirely expunged a kingdom, but that there are still hangers on. 63,360 inches to a mile. Okay. Is that a correct? Is that exactly how many inches there are in a mile? Squared, presumably, right? How many square inches? Yeah. So we can have an empire that's almost done with expunging a monarchy, right? And that potentially could be part of our central tension. That we'd have secret societies and things within cities. We'd have members of like a senate that potentially going to Google. Okay, yeah, we'll take that. I'm not going to argue with Google. Yeah, so hidden, yeah, exactly, like hidden royalists. And would we have the entire monarchy be in hiding, or could we have a city that potentially is still lives under the rule of the monarchy, and the empire is yet to take. Pontus is here to answer the important questions, right? You think when your players sit there on day one and they say how many does this world use the metric system, or do they still use imperial, right? And Pontus says they still use imperial in places where they respect the monarchy, but the empire uses the metric system as a way to try and force out those that are still loyal to the monarchy. One last royalist city, big, yeah, I like that. Yeah, and there's like a king or a queen who sits on a throne in that city and refuses to vacate. Yes, Ali Scarlet. Yes, Ali Scarlet. Yeah, I like that. So I'm gonna start writing some stuff down. So 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 our world is by an empire. One last city stands in defiance, right? And then our players can decide: do they want to be loyalists when they start a campaign? And this is a kind of thing that we can talk about. This is one thing that we can talk about in a session 0, right? Before we get too far into the campaign, do we want to play as a party who are loyal still, or want to explore a campaign where we're helping the monarchy, or do we want to have a player campaign where we're a part of the empire and the kingdom just exists somewhere, and that potential tension can come and create a fracture in the campaign that we're playing? Because I don't imagine that players would want to be a part of like the empire killing off the last percent of the monarchy, because that doesn't sound very fun. It could be if they want to do that, but it sounds like you'd be in a massive army taking the last city kind of thing. Would be. We want to be like the focal point of our adventure, don't we? We don't want to stands in defiance. Cool. So what? Yeah, I love it too. And I'm assuming that you're when you're saying I love all this, you're talking about the 15,840,000 correct square inches in a mile. Maybe that's the capital, and the monarchs have power to the empire to rule over everywhere else because they don't care. So maybe that's the capital, and the monarchs have power to the empire to rule over everywhere else because they don't care so much for everyone else. Yeah. So yeah, that's just what I was about to say. That was our world or the region that we're playing in, was it an entire kingdom, or is it a case that we had multiple kingdoms for different races and they've come under one banner as an empire, and there's one race that's defying the empire and keeping their own monarchy? Unlike obviously they wouldn't necessarily all be monarchies, but all of the other races have not surrendered, but have like joined together to form this empire, and we have one last race that's like, nah, not us. Or did we have a conquering race that we could have a race that had become rulers of everyone through conquering, right? We could have the British Empire of D&D, right? That claim to rule everyone, right? And when given the opportunity to join an empire instead, all the other races were a-okay with that, and our formerly glorious kingdom not so happy about it. or a third option that I haven't thought of. The monarchy could be very glorified to anybody not in many should realise that they're human supremacists, but completely unaware that the empire that they believe they rule over are attempting to overthrow. So you're thinking like having a like they're one and the same, right? That they don't realise they're losing power outside the capital. I like that. Yeah, so if you live in the capital, you're like you're super loyal to the king and you fly his banner and stuff. But you don't realise that outside of those walls, everyone decries the name of the king because he's a jerk, right? Or the queen, she's a jerk. The monarch is a joke. Very good. Yeah, and it can and it can almost be like a joke to uh, people outside of the capital. But yeah, so like we have at sports games, we stand up and we sing the national anthem kind of thing at the start of the ceremony, and everyone knows it's an absolute joke because nobody actually cares about the kingdom and it's on its last legs. And you'd have grown up in a like socialist environment, right? Or more, probably not socialist. We'd still be very like feudal in reality, right? Because it's a fantasy world. But we would, um, yeah, you'd grow up believing that the real power is the empire, and the king just sits on a throne in the middle of it, and he thinks he's in charge, and he's not. And yeah, and then perhaps we can create a tension out of people deciding whether actually what's happening to the kingdom isn't right because the power's being seized illegally or politics coming in. Yeah. Hey, this is world building. I'll build a world of any shape. Uh, so yeah, I like that. So our world was once a great empire, a great kingdom. The the power has all been seized. Empire that governs, right? Governs beneath the king, right? The monarchy. They still believe they hold the power, but in reality, yeah. Only the capital remains loyal, right? So do we want what? I feel like we're heading towards humans, but like what race do we want the monarchy to be? There are certainly a few races that fit better, right? If we're going to talk about a monarchy that had established a kingdom through force as well, right? I think that's probably where we're going. That there was a time when everyone lived separately, and one race sort of grabs the power, the reptilian one, Dragonborn. Yeah, so I think Dragonborn's interesting but we've already created like quite a weird scenario with Dragonborn where they're already like mistrusted and stuff because of how it's perceived that they came to be. Yeah, humans like there's the idea as well that like with amongst all these races that have persisted for so long, you know, for millennia or what have you, humans are relatively new, and we've arrived overpopulated, decided we're going to take over by force because we're naive and haven't been able to keep a hold of. Humans, kings die, don't they? And like the likes of dwarves and elves can survive to see 3 or 4 monarchs come and go, and those monarchs believe that they rule over us, but you know we remember when they were still in nappies, kind of thing. I think human. Green Knight, the human trope out there would fit. A lot of other races have various reasons for being there. Yeah, yeah. I think human fits because again, like it's tropey, but like I see if we're talking about conquering as well, there's that idea that because of the longevity of other races, that they wouldn't necessarily fight as hard to if the humans come over here and say, "Oh, we're in charge now," you know, and you're an elf, and you're like, "I'm gonna be around for like 2,000 years," and like you've just arrived today and you think you're in charge now. It's like you just wait it out. Like why lose your life fighting it when you're probably going to live to see like the dying days of the kingdom, which is what's happening now, right? Like they think they've done a really good job of like taking over, and in reality, everyone else is just like, all right, cool, yeah, you guys are great, you guys are aces, yeah, welcome, we'll put your flag up and stuff, great. I think you won't be around for long because we've seen plenty like you. The diminished race like dwarves could be a key part of further down the line. Give play history. A diminished race like dwarves could be a key part further down the line. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, you can have like if the players if the players in session zero want to play a party that's mostly like not necessarily loyalists but it's grown up loyalist, then you can have that like feeding of information in where like oh actually like everything you remember about how the empire was formed and how the kingdom was formed and how majestic and triumphant the humans were when they took over the world doesn't actually fit with anyone else's interpretation of what happened. Like you just sort of walked in and planted a flag, and everyone else just said, "Yeah, whatever." Yeah, love it. So we've got a human monarchy, and the and our start calling it a senate, right? Our senate are like uh, multicultural, right, and that includes humans as well, right? I mean, yeah. So yeah, that doesn't. We're not excluding humans from being like what could be interpreted as the good guys in this story. And but this is a point of contention as well, where like we want to discuss, as I said, when we have a session zero with our players, we want to discuss what they want out of this campaign because if they decide that, and again, so I'm going to go back over like old territory here, but a part of like the building a mesh and not like a fully fleshed out world is that if we sit down and we've got 4 players who all agree it'd be so cool to be loyalists who want to return the empire, the kingdom to its former glory, and they believe in the king's right to rule or the monarch's right to rule, right? Um, let's do that, and we can very easily twist a few knobs behind the scene and say like actually yeah we're the kingdom of the good guys, right? We throw in a couple of stories about like uncouth activity and other races and stuff, and we can make the kingdom the good guys. But it feels more natural that they're not at the moment. Then it began as humans only. yeah. So that kind of plays into the idea that there would be a human senate because humans in the kingdom believed that they are actually uh, they're actually better than other races, right? They believe in their own importance, right? And as you start to dig into the history of the kingdom and like is our right to rule ironclad, then you start to realize that actually it's not, and you start to look at the other races and say like what are their thoughts on it, and then you start to bring in like important members of those other races, right, to see what their opinion is, and then you realize that actually, oh no, we're scum. Half a party guards on the and the others are Senate stowaways being brought in to assist the coup. That's amazing. Yeah, exactly. So and this is why we want to have a session zero, right? Which when we get further down the line and we start to plan the campaign rather than like the world, we're going to talk about talking more because I keep saying session zero, right? And people who are watching maybe don't know what I mean by that. And we're going to go into greater detail and we're going to plan a session zero for our campaign. And these are the kind of things that like we want to discuss. So like without going too far into it, session zero is just what I would have at the start of a campaign. Get all your players together, and I would say to them, look, don't come with a character because we're gonna work together to build characters, and we bring them in, and you try and plan like a little activity for them to do, like try and give them some short like combat scenario that they can play through, so people who are into that don't get bored. But you bring them in and explain as much of the world as you can comfortably do without boring everyone with all the details, right? And explain to them that here's what's going on. There's an empire. There was a kingdom. The empire are trying to like overthrow the kingdom because it's nonsense. Here's a little bit of backstory, and then let the players discuss amongst themselves what they want, what kind of campaign they want to play, and that's when like ideas like this you would throw at them and say, "This is you can do this or you can do that," because we have a tendency in D&D, especially when someone's DMing for the first time and you're not using like a source material, is people have a preconception of what they want to do before they arrive, and somebody without knowing anyone else who's coming to the table thinks I want to be a dwarf paladin and I want to find the lost temple of my god, right, and restore it to its former power and what have you. And they show up, and there's another person who's like got their own idea of what they want to do, and nobody's ideas like combine. And then you, as a DM, have to try and like create a situation where everyone gets what they want, but no one wants the same thing. And if we can get everyone on board before they start playing, that they all have, as a group, they have an ultimate goal, then you're just gonna like in my experience, you can have a better game for everyone. And that's not to say that players can't have their own agenda, but if we have like a main, and that's where like having a central tension, the central tension isn't necessarily the player's storyline, but it it helps to it'll help them to put themselves on a track for a story that they want to follow as a group, and then they can all have their own ideas outside of that. And like on the way, I want to become like whatever, right? They can all have their own personal missions that they want to achieve, but they will create personal missions that aren't at odds with the group's mission, uh, unless they're a rogue, in which case they'll want to burn the world. So that's fine. It's roguelike, you know. Is it reasonable for a DM to give that much of a backstory if they're letting players make their own characters? Yeah, so that's why like we're giving you like an overview of the world, right, and not like the like your idea of having the party half the party be guards on the on a boat and the other half be like the Senate, that's kind of you're at a point there where you're potentially informing too much of their decision. But that's if we said that to them on session 0 and they haven't got a character there yet, it's up to them to decide if they like that idea or not. Because if you were to be if we were to say before you create your character that you were a senator, it doesn't really inform too much of your decisions, right? Like if we're giving you the choice beforehand and the group as a whole get to decide if that's what they want to do, right? Just because you're a senator doesn't mean you can't be any of the things that you want it to be. Right? It just helps to create a bit of your like work life, I guess. And then guards is like the vanilla of like role play anyway, because any story, like any backstory, can end up with you being a guard in reality, right? So yeah, like these kind of story ideas help because we want our players to cooperate from day one, right? And that's not necessarily like we want player conflicts a little bit. We want our characters to not necessarily trust each other at the start, because that's a fun part of like character development, to start to work together as a group. But outside of the game, all of our players want to be on the same level before we start playing, and it's a good way to do that is to have a session 0 and let them decide what their group's mission is before they start. And I've completely forgotten where we were now, because that was a real deep rabbit hole, but a good informative one. Yeah, so we're talking about this. We're talking about having a Senate that's not entirely human, and yeah, so that the Senate was started to help probably in reality to help the monarchy appear as though it cared about the everyman. Like let's let them decide. Let's let them have like a little bit of democracy behind the scenes and let them think they get to make decisions, and they don't. And then when you get people together who think they're important like that, then they start to have discussions without the king. The ideas start to flow, and they start to realize that the kingdom isn't maybe what they thought it was. So yeah, I like that. I like that. I like where we're going with that. I think that's a real good place to start, because it gives you like a few places, and like I said, you can flip it on its head if your players want to, and have the kingdom be the good guy and stuff. It just gives them like a nice framework for making the decisions early on. And we've decided that we want to start at the middle. So Pontus mentioned the stuff to the west that's separated by mountains, and I don't know if you wanted to start there or you were just pointing it out because it's an interesting like geographical feature. So I'm just going to wait because that's also like quite an interesting place to start, because it kind of gives this like sandboxy type scenario where like you're starting with these 3 settlements, and you feel like it's like the tutorial island. Yeah, you can go to these like 3 settlements, and there's a way out. If you want to go to the world at large, you can do that, but you get to play in the little sandbox first, and then move out if you want to. But either works. I don't mind. This is a democracy. It's just occasionally one where I'll stick with Antonius, Because and the reason I'm asking this is because we want to, as I said earlier, we want to give more detail to our starting location, and then and then sort of like fade out. We want to have like an information gradient as we get further away from the starting point, where we want to have like a basic idea of what's going on. It'd be good to we kind of want to decide. So we want to decide where we're starting, because that's going to inform where we apply most detail to our plans, right? And if we're going with this idea, we kind of want to decide where the capital is, because that's going to be a very important part of the map. Do we want the capital to be close by because we want the players to address what's going on early, or do we want it to be further away because we want our players to level up before they start to engage with that? I'm almost out of coffee, you know. Yeah, like sort of if we're putting it, if we're having it be like our ultimate goal, then in reality we almost don't ever want to get to, like, ending a campaign is like an important thing to do, right? You don't want to, you want to have an ultimate goal and you want to be able to get there eventually, because otherwise what's the point, right? And you shouldn't be scared of letting a campaign finish. It can be very rewarding for everyone involved, but we don't want to be ending the campaign like on the 5th week, because we want to play D&D, right? And we also don't want to spend all this time building a campaign that's going to end like really quickly. We want to play. We want to get better at DMing, and we want everyone to have fun. And so it's kind of like you kind of want to put it. You kind of want to put your end goal somewhere where you can almost scale it further back as you play. If you put it, you kind of put it just out of view, so that at any time you can decide, actually, like, we're getting there now, or like you can artificially expand like the length of the campaign, because that way you should hopefully as a DM be able to get a feel for when the game feels like it should be coming to an end. If you start to think that like your players are starting to feel less committed because it's like it's never going to end type thing, we can like move it in and be like, okay, it's coming to a close now. Well, hopefully, the dream is that you reach a point in the story where it feels really natural to start to peak, right? So, I think we'll go far away, and I like the idea of starting in the town at the bottom. When I originally drew this map, I was like, I was drawing the map to draw the map, really, but I was thinking about a campaign as I draw it because it helps to like envisage that kind of thing. I had originally thought that you would start in the town at the bottom, but that's not to say that's correct. Just Robbie likes it, so let's start there. So I was starting town or city. Do you want to start in a town or a city? And I would guess, based on its geographical location, that it would be like a port town, or or a port city, right? Is it an important military location, or is it important for economical reasons, right? Is it fishing town? We're going town, a fishing town, yeah. We're going Brid, sunny Brid. So we're going to start our campaign in the southernmost settlement, a fishing town. And for now it's called Sunnybrid. More of a market town, fishing town. Like don't fishing towns tend to be like kind of market towns anyway? Like we'll have, because just because of the nature of like, if there's a resource there that other settlements need, they'll come to trade it, right? Unless there's a market town really close that the fishermen get up early, they don't want to have to cart about fish all day as well. Fishing town. It's also a market town. Let's Yeah. I'm with you. There's a delay, so sometimes conversations quite. Yeah, like it's not so important as like a military, and that helps us as well. Like just the premise that this town exists to feed the empire, not as like a military presence, and that helps us to like set our campaign off on like quite a low level because we haven't. This isn't something we've discussed, but I'm assuming we're starting off like a low level campaign. I like to start at level 1, and there's no reason why you couldn't start this campaign in a different city and say we're starting like at level 10. But I would like to start at the beginning because if it we're hopefully creating source material for people to try DMing for the first time. And if you're DMing for the first time, I'd recommend starting at a low level because your players are probably new as well, and you're new, and having a like 12th level sorcerer show up with a stack of spells that they want to use, and you have to create encounters that are fitting for 12th level player characters that aren't deadly, right? So everyone's going to have fun. You're just going to make your own job a lot more difficult, right? It's very easy to open up any source material that exists and find a 1st to 3rd level encounter with goblins. So, and like cut and paste it into your game. Or we're going to create ones ourselves, but if you want to replace the big bad with a different monster, then you should very easily be able to find that kind of material. It could have a sector that's far more upmarket, and that's where the military aspect is. Could be funded by the kingdom because it's geographically it's a good place for supplies. Support underfunded. It's only just been passed into the Senate. You don't get to the Cloud District very often, do you? Yeah, so it's a historically underfunded, right? There is an upper Sunnybridge near the King's Garrison. Where the nobles, where the nobles, local notables, right? The town has just passed under control of the Senate. So yeah, like we have this idea then that the empty was mega posh. Yeah, so like a couple of things. Having this is all great. So thanks for the input. But the having this kind of like we're immediately we're treading into like the campaign again, but having this idea that we've just transitioned to the Senate to Senate control is a very good way of immediately informing our players what's going on, right? So we're putting our players into this town, and they're going to start interacting with things, and they're going to learn that everything's underfunded because it used to be ruled over by the king, right? That's a piece of information immediately. They're like, oh, places where the kingdom is still like ruling people that eat very well, even when they live in a town where they fish, right? People struggle to feed themselves, and then it's transitioning over to the Senate, and the people we would assume our NPCs are probably happy about it, right? So when they interact with NPCs and they find out that our NPCs are happy about the transition, then that informs them that life under the Senate is better. And immediately, like in the first couple of sessions, the first few interactions they've had with NPCs, they're learning 2 very important pieces of information about our central tension. That we've decided to create a central tension now, and I think we're going to stick with it. But yeah, like we're informing our players without sitting down and saying, "Here, read this." It's 16 chapters of fiction I've written about the world. We're giving them like important information without overburdening them. it's very easy for them to understand what's going on because all the NPCs in the area have the same opinion. And if we're going with this idea that the capital's far away, then it feels kind of natural that the Senate would take over, like ebbing outwards. They would, ignoring the capital at the epicenter, they would gain control of the important cities and towns first, all the ones with the large military garrisons, and like the large cities where like invention and like all the aristocrats live and stuff. Like we would take control of those first because they're more important, right? And what about little Sunnybrid on the beach? You know, where they bring in fishing trawlers and stuff, and all the poor villagers are starving, all the poor townspeople are starving and stuff, right? That would be really low, even though the Senate are, you know, quote unquote the good guys. That would be very low on your list of priorities. So it would be. It makes sense in our estimation that we're in the death throes of the kingdom, right? One of the last places to go is this impoverished town on the coast. So cool, like it. Could have the elderly NPCs that are still partisan royalists against their best interests. Basically, stop it from being too obvious that the kingdom are bad. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to be too like in your face. And old people being stuck in their ways are a good way to like, you know, you can have the what's the Senate ever done for us kind of like, you know, the kingdom's protected us for all these years. When in reality, what's the kingdom protected you from? There's no answer to that question, but the old people don't like change, and you know the senators are just lining their own pockets and stuff. You get okay, well, there definitely will be an element of that. That nothing's black and white. If there's a Senate that's slowly taking over control, there are definitely going to be members of the Senate that are doing that because they want to line their pockets, right? So yeah, we want to create that kind of conflict within the tension because like we don't want anything to be black and white. We want our players, if our players want to explore that storyline, they can, right? We give them the opportunity to if they decide that okay, the Senate taking over is great, but we want to investigate who's in the Senate and try and root out the bad guys, then go right ahead. There's a premise established for that. Speak to the old people; they might be able to tell you who you know never really liked that guy. You know, he's just slimy so and so. Cool. So we've got Sunnybrid. From the Senate. In general, the populace are keen on keen on the change. To find those who oppose often the elderly. And you would definitely. So if we're going multicultural, you would definitely have groups of. I'm trying not to be too negative, but you would definitely find groups of humans. Like, I've just got this idea in my head of like some bald-headed 30-year-old bloke down the pub who is so opposed to the change because it's change. It doesn't necessarily have to be old. You would find groups of loyalists all over the place, right? And you'd have militia and stuff and underground organisations that want to, who want to stop the Senate taking over. And that gives our players another opportunity to explore whether they want to be a part of this or not. It's an opportunity for quest down to hunt down and kill for the corrupt Senate people. Yeah, exactly. Like the bad eggs are a threat to takeover, right? Because any senator who's using his power for evil gives the king an argument for why they shouldn't take over, and gives Bob Big Bazzer, the PMP. Yeah, exactly. You get Big Bazzer down the old horse and cart, and all his cronies who have created a little secret society who refuse to pay taxes to the Senate, and you know can be found loosening the bolts on the wagon wheels of the Senate's like wagons and stuff. Yeah, partisan noblest baldies, exactly. So I'm gonna P and B. So we would have secretive organizations of within who and and these groups would so we'd have them. What am I trying to say? So these societies would range from it wouldn't necessarily be one like well orchestrated secret society across the entire empire. We would have pocket groups that ranged from everything from essentially like terrorists, yeah, to just little groups of blokes who sit and grumble about it, kind of thing, right? You'd find everything from like, you know, ancient orders of like, you know, kind of Freemason type like organizations who used to benefit a lot under the kingdom, who will use whatever power they have within the hierarchical structure to try and bring it down, to people complaining in a pub, right? Hey, Mike Powell, our chat professed sexiest man alive. How are you doing? We are. You join us right in the midst of session planning. So we're up to so we've decided that we've got an empire, right? And the empire is in this dying stages of taking over a kingdom that used to a kingdom of men that used to rule over our world, right? Who had taken over by force, and has since almost been abolished, right? The king still lives in the king still resides in the capital, where you'll find all of the noblists who still exist, all those loyal to the monarchy. But in reality, most of the kingdom is now ruled over by like a senate, and we've decided our players are going to start their campaign in a small coastal town called Sunnybrid, which we could change, but I like. And we're just discussing how we'd have separatist organizations, not separatist organizations, noblest organizations hidden within society, and that gives our players an opportunity to decide which side they're on. Right? If they want to join the rebels, they can join the rebels, or if they want to help root out the rebels, that's an option too. Super in and out. That's absolutely fine. I appreciate you stopping by. I appreciate everyone for being here. You know, I feel the love. What's it like? When I was Berlin about Mike Powell. It's a bit weird when Ali Scarlett's on time in it and other people aren't. Feels wrong. Ali was the first person in chat, you know. Yeah, so yeah, I feel like we've got a good basis for Sunnybrid, right? And immediately we're in a situation where we could start a game with our players, and having a better idea of what our encounters are going to be and what have you for the first few sessions. We could have our players wander around this town, and short of interacting necessarily with NPCs, right? We could give them a good idea of what's going on in this town, right? We know that the people are about to transition from being quite impoverished to hopefully being less so, right? So the mood in general in the town is quite high. We know that our NPCs would be feeling a lot more quite jovial. The pubs and inns would be crowded because people are having a good time, right? You'd be able to find groups of people grumbling in the corner of the pub who don't like the change. We've already we're starting to feel like this town's alive already. Yeah, I mean, that's Rona for you, right? That's Rona life. What day is it? I don't know. Today's Sunday because I'm streaming, and that's how I know. Work tomorrow, stream on Sunday. Yeah, so hopefully those of you who've never DM'd are already feeling like this is something you can do now, right? We're already in a position where you could be asked questions about this town, and that's what, like, spoilers. That's what's been happening, right? Is I've been asking chat, and people who haven't DM'd before are able to answer questions about this town because we've already set premise for the things that are going on, and I could ask you more detailed questions about what's going on in the town now, and you would be able to use the things that we've established together to flesh out what's going on, right? Like I said, like we know that the mood would be quite high, and like the people still would look dishevelled, but they're happy, right? Because they see big change coming, and like they're optimistic that everything's going to get better. So the town's still like a poo hole, but the people there don't mind, kind of thing. And it's quite an interesting place to introduce some of our races and how our different deities get involved. So what kind of mix of races do we want? I feel very like I've said before, like quite often I'll start somewhere that's human heavy because it helps our players who are humans in real life, most likely. The thing just clicks. Nice. Yeah, like Ali's good for that kind of nuanced. People have blind hope. Yeah, I like that as well. But like when your family's like used to starving, right, and just rubbing pennies together, like they don't the average person in Sunnybrid isn't gonna, yeah, the average person isn't actually gonna be up to date with what's going on in the Senate, right? But change can't be bad because things are pretty bad, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, things can't get worse. So, like, yeah, parity else. Yeah, we want to introduce, like, I love that idea as well. So, like, uh, the mood of the town is positive. The peasants. I'm just going to call them peasants. It's nothing personal. That's what they are. The peasants live in blind optimism that the coming change will be positive. After all, how could the Senate be worse? And that helps play into our that helps play into like the conflicts that is it, like we don't actually know that we as the planners of this campaign have kind of decided that the change is probably a good thing, but our players shouldn't know that coming into the game, and we're going to let them decide, like, is it good or bad? And this gives them the opportunity to explore both sides of the idea that it's blind faith plays into the partisans because, like, they would be able to argue for reasons why the kingdom's better, and the people who are pro change are probably likely to not have the answers. So it would if you were to enter into a discussion about it, it would seem as though the loyalists have more of an idea of what's to come. Maybe the Pirates are loyal as they want to keep the port skin. Against the kingdom. Sus. Senate sus. Can we get a copyright check on Senate sus? If ever we reach a point where like I'm allowed to have my own emote for Twitch, it's going to be a copyright check one. Yeah, so if we've decided our roles are kind of piratey, right, then that brings in that brings like another Brexit. But if Brexit was actually a good thing, I couldn't agree more. So the elves bring in like this other idea that there would be people who are opposed to the Senate that aren't for the kingdom. So if we had a world that was separated into different like ruling classes and stuff, there'd have been like smaller empires and smaller kingdoms depending on the race, right? And humans came and just took over everything, right? And now we're getting like a senate that are going to rule over everyone. Like there would be races that never wanted everything to be whole anyway, right? There would be people who want it to go back to how it was, not like while the Senate's better maybe than the kingdom, it's just the kingdom with a different mask on, right? So we can have our there is a strong. So are we going with like the town itself is the town itself is largely human in population, because when you get like a mixing pot of cultures, like Stony Bridge isn't where your gnomes and your halflings are going to necessarily go. There would be some, but like the cities are where you'll find like an even distribution of races because they're the desirable places to live. But so like we'd probably have like 60% humans, and then like or maybe more, largely human population. There's a heavy of our seafaring elves, which bring with them the idea that there are some races and organisations who although opposed to the kingdom are not necessarily pro Senate, right? Pirates of the Caribbean style. The elves where life is dying. Or drifters of different races. Yeah, like it's a port town, so you're gonna get like, but like we wouldn't. There's not going to be like there's not going to be like the halfling quarter where there's loads of halflings who live down a street together, like because the different races that live here have come here by sea and are just like ragtag, So they'd be very integrated into the society because they're like they didn't come as a massive group; they've come as like individuals, but they're not. Yeah, so yeah, I like that. They'd be very well integrated, but there aren't large numbers of them, which helps their integration because if 10% of the population are halflings, you might find that they congregate together. But if you're like one of the only two halfling families in town, you kind of have to like my brain's not working. You have to socialize with the humans because like what else are you gonna do? And there's like the odd turtle. There's the odd turtle that lives in the sewers. The elves are in life. Yeah, so the elves are like the elves would have found it tough, right? Like So let's have a little delve into that, shall we? So if our elves are like piratey, there's premise that like while the world was disorganized, well, not necessarily disorganized, but the world was like separated, it'd have been very easy to drift around the coast, like wreaking havoc here and there, and not necessarily wreaking havoc, but being piratey here and there and traveling. But when everything's under one banner, it's a lot harder to like take advantage of like information leakage, for instance. If all of the coastal towns are part of the same monarchy, then it's a lot easier for them to coordinate like anti-piracy campaigns and stuff. So I think having a race or two that you don't meet until later on. Absolutely do not respond well to them because it's real like D&D 101 to have like people being racist to the like one of the party because they're a specific race and stuff. It's just like it just creates. It's just it might be like cheesy, but it's a very easy way to like create some tension early on if your players are. I would use that like sparingly because it's like a tool in your toolbox, right? And then like if your players aren't reacting to the environment, make the environment react to them, kind of thing. And that's the kind of thing. If we're going with this with this idea that we're largely human, but there are well integrated other species, then that gives us the opportunity to adapt on the fly, right? We can decide when our players have decided what races they want to be. We can then decide that there's a dwarf in the party and there's not many dwarves here. Or if there's not a dwarf in the party but there's a gnome, we can decide there's no gnomes here. That kind of thing. Like we don't have to decide that on the spot. We can just add that in like on the fly because we've decided that ahead of time. And then if someone's a dragonborn or a tiefling, you just create chaos. Everyone's scared of them or just despises them or whatever. And then if the party decide that there's 6 dwarves, then you can just go, there's no dwarves. And not only are people seeing a dwarf for the first time in like a decade, they're seeing 6 of them in a party. And how mad is that? And then you decide how people would react to that very strange occurrence. So our elves have struggled with the elves have struggled within the empire coordinated settlements, right, are harder to raid, right, harder to. I'm trying to avoid like suggesting that they're always like plundering and stuff because like we don't want them to be like the bad guys, but like they live a very like on the line kind of existence. And right, I'm going to say raid, but it's harder to raid coordinate settlements. Like when there was 2 kingdoms side by side, you could dart back and forth and like it's good luck to touch Dwarf's beard. Oh my god, yeah, just have everyone in the inn just surrounding them. I believe that happens to. To Mikey in your campaign, did it not? When he was a gnome, we started as a gnome. Like gnomes are always good for that because no one's ever seen a gnome, and they just fit that. They just fit that trope of being like good luck and stuff really well. Cool. So I think we've got a really good idea of our starting settlement now, right? We've got multiple notable things to say about the settlement that we can then, when we're trying to create material for our players to play with, then we've got this idea of like a divided opinion on the takeover, right? We can create like quests and stuff based off of both sides of that conflict. We've established like a central tension where our players can, if they would like to, they can ascend up this path to become involved in the global politics, right? That's something they're interested in, and we've got this nice like side thing of the our elves representing other societies that aren't happy with either of the reigns, right? So they can even go down that route if they want. They could decide that they want to help the elves who've like lost their way of life a bit. It'd be very easy to have like some elven NPCs that want them to help, right? Distract the guards so that they can steal one of their boats back and get out of town and stuff. You know, if they want to decide to be, if they want to be more roguelike in their party, or like if they want to, if they haven't decided which side they're on, maybe test the local law and see how they react to this kind of behaviour to help them make a more informed decision about whether the change is good, right? So let's have a quick look at. We've got like half an hour left, which is great. We've done so much in an hour and a half. So what I want to do now is just have, like I said, we've got like a fair amount of detail for this, for where we're starting, and we want to look at like the areas close to where we are. So is there anywhere on the map that, for starters, is there anywhere on the map that we want to place our capital, right? Because that's going to be an important part of the story. And then we should like have a very quick overview of the other settlements that are nearby, and make any like notable, like make notes of anything notable about those cities that we think would create like an interesting development for the players. Because we don't want all of our cities to be the same, right? There could be, for instance, there could be another city that's very loyalist, that's not the capital, and maybe that city's loyalist because it behooves the people who live there to live under a kingdom. Maybe they don't actually care about the takeover or anything. They're not on either side, but they know that tax-wise they pay less if it's a kingdom, or where the roads cross should maybe the capital. Are you talking about I do this thing where I think like I hover my mouse over the map and you can't see that. Yeah, the capital should be like a really big walled city. I think it should be like a really imposing, like just for like foreshadowing and stuff, right? I want like a really big imposing walled city where, because the king feels safe in there, right? Everything inside those walls he believes is like a myopic view of the world. He believes everything inside those walls is representative of what's going on outside, and he doesn't have the focus. I keep saying he, but we haven't decided if. Yeah, so the like the one that's a statue up in the top right, the closer. Yeah. So we've got our capital. Has anyone got a name for it? Capital city. Yeah. And that's like testament to the people who live there, right? They kind of like their troubles are so far removed from what's discussed in a senate and what decisions a king makes. Like they're neutral because like it's unlikely that any of these big decisions are going to change their lives that much. And like they, you know, without access to the like news and stuff of the city, it's like what? Why do they care? As long as there's fish in the sea, you know, as long as the tides aren't too choppy and they can make a living, then. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, just the forking of the road type thing. The capital city is the capital city's in the north, right? Let me just. Capital city lies in the north. Large walled city that sits like, oh my god. The north-south river. The interior of the large fortified represent what the, I'm just saying words now, what the monarchy believes is, yeah, so like so like that, just writing that small amount of text about the capital city, like we're so far away from our players ever getting there in the first session that we don't need to know what days of the week is the market, right, in the city centre. We don't need to know that stuff, but we do know that if we have an NPC, for instance, in Sunnybrid who used to live in this city, and they were asked a question about it, we would know, kind of like you'd have ideas in your head of what the architecture would look like, because like it would be imposing, and like there'd be a lot of masonry, and there'd be symbology of the kingdom all over the place. You know, there'd be statues of the king like on every other street, and you know, different monarchs and stuff throughout the years, and people would talk about the greatness of the kingdom and what have you. Reich Flair the third. So we're going with the king. I'm glad. I'm glad we're putting that to bed, because I keep saying king and like king. Love it. Third of his name. I'm going to change this, but what is space? What's the word space? Like, it references like openness, not outer space, right? Flairford. Rick Flairford. The third of his name. Space Mountain Palace. Yeah, so palace. Yeah. So what I was saying, there's enough information here about the capital until we get there later on in the campaign. Like, we've got more than enough to explain the city. Like, we could have a trader come in on a cart to the town where our players are playing, and they could have come from the city, and they would be able to give you information. You could ask them what news of the city, and they'd be able to explain that, like, you know, spirits are like maybe high because the king's just had the king has 3 birthdays a year, and he's had his 3rd birthday, and every one of those is a celebration in the streets where ale and wine flow freely and what have you. And the trader's happy because he made a fortune. He took a load of basic tat into the city and told the overinflated nobles. He regaled them with tales of the history of these items that was not necessarily true, and he managed to fleece them for a lot of money because everyone in that city is like deluded, right? We've got ideas in our head already of what goes on there. Mount Galaxy. It's an opulent and open place, yeah. Space Palace. Space Mountain Palace. Why is it a mountain though? Where's the mountain come from? Space Mount. Anyway, fine. It's an opulent and open. There's not a mountain, but it's they call it the mountain because the palace is like shaped like a mountain. You know, it's like from a distance, the turrets and the peaks make it look like a jagged mountain, and it's colloquially known as Space Mountain. There we go. That does not begin with colloquially. Oh no! I thought I nailed it first time. There we go. Yeah. Oldest ride, longest life. So we've got, so looking at the map, there's quite a lot of open space between Sunnybrid and the city to the northwest, right? But this is just sort of like notable settlements. So between here and there, you'd find like a lot of small villages and stuff, and the topography, especially to the south, there's quite a lot of open plain. So I would imagine that between here and there, there's a lot of farmland, small villages and stuff, and villages would form. Right, we've got trade routes. Right, the city to the north that's closer to the mountains would need access to the fish that come in to Sunnybrid, and so that trade route would create opportunities for flourishing villages, right, along the trade route, who could make a living farming whilst also having access to the trade that comes and goes. And that when I was like an inside note, when I was drawing the map, that's kind of intentional to create this like long void, because for a start, we don't want our players to just leave the town before they've explored all our content, right? They're perfectly willing to, they're perfectly welcome to, but we want them to want to stay. So making that journey a long one makes it more likely that they'll want to stay at the start, because we want them to play in this stamp box before they leave it, right? But also, wide open areas like this give us a lot of opportunity to introduce Gribblies, right? It's unlikely that we're going to start our campaign in a town that's being overrun by orcs, right? We want them to have the relative safety of a settlement, and then if they want to leave that settlement, they have to contend with the monsters that we throw them. And it makes perfect sense for in this vast void between here and the next city, they would have to go through terrain and like navigate like potentially hazardous expanses where they might find packs of roaming orcs and goblins and stuff. So that's that, and that gives us opportunities along the way as well, to, because this settlement's the nearest one and it's a town, not a city. We've made this a lot easier for ourselves, right? As a town, we wouldn't have the garrison available to properly protect all of the surrounding land. So that gives our players ample opportunity to encounter NPCs who have problems with monsters and such, right? So if they were to leave town and go a couple of miles down the road, they'd find a village where there are poor helpless farmers who are trying to contend with like invading goblins and stuff. Because this is D&D, right? And our players want to fight goblins and behead orcs and what have you. You know, they're leveling up really quickly at the start of the game, and they're learning new abilities all the time, and they want to test them out on unwitting hobgoblins and things. So that's just a note on that. But we want to have these two closest settlements. We want to give them something that entices our players to leave eventually. And Ali said about this idea of, because there's two, there's like a fork in the road, and we then potentially, without necessarily saying it to our players, we're presenting them with an option, because we've decided on this central tension, that we're kind of giving them like a more clear path if they're choosing option A, and a more clear path if they're choosing option B, which is nice. So we should maybe consider that when we're looking at these two cities, to have one of these cities be more friendly to loyalists, and one of them be ultra friendly to like people who are pro Senate, right? the socialists, right? And we've got one city. They should probably both be cities as well, right? Because we want to we start off in a town, and it's like natural progression that where do we go next? We want to go to a big city, right? And again, there's quite a lot of expanse between these two places, and that's not to say there wouldn't be potentially like another town in the mix here somewhere, but it's maybe not as notable. I could very easily see there being a town like where the road, there's like a path across where the road forks down to our Sunnybrid, where traders can go directly between the cities, missing Sunnybrid out. They're they'd be quite likely that the two forks in the road there would have either a large village or a town on them, right? If we're talking about GCSE geography, that those two places would be prime locations for settlement. So there would either be quite a large village or a town that maybe isn't as notable as Sunnybrid, and we can use those as like staging areas if we want. If we want to throw something new at our players, we can on the fly create a new environment in those towns. But I would leave those as kind of like vanilla feeling towns, because I wouldn't unless you have an idea for why you want players to stay there, you don't want to entice them to stay. Make it boring without making it too boring, if that makes sense. So we have one city to the east that lies across a waterway, right? And there's like a narrower river before where there's a bridge that would probably be quite an important bridge, right? I'm thinking immediately that bridge would probably have like its own small garrison. That bridge, if we're talking about a world that's inhabited by monsters, right? This bridge is really important for trade, and there might be like a castle or a garrison there to protect the crossing because it's important. And then this other city has developed as a crossing to this river. So I'm imagining somewhere that's like got quite a lot of a military presence, whereas maybe the city to the north isn't so, right? Maybe that one the one to the north is like quite naturally is quite well protected, right? There's mountains to the west and an expanse of hills to the east. So in terms of warfare and stuff, it would be quite well protected. Like it wouldn't need as much of a garrison to protect it in like a wartime. So that feels as though it wouldn't be as militaristic. That makes sense to people. I don't know how we feel about how that would affect the different societies in those places. So if anyone's got any interesting ideas for either of them or a name or anything, then I think we've still got 10 minutes. And I think that's like 5 minutes each is more than enough just to get a bit of a framework about them. Because I like the idea of this idea of the fork in the road, and it'd be good to just lay like a little bit of that framework down, right? So we have an idea of which way we would want our players to be nudged, right? Through communicating with NPCs, right? If they decide they want to help the Senate, then it's good to go to this place because there's a guy there who's who's helped appoint members of the Senate, and the other city there's a strong loyalist agenda for whatever reason. My inclination is for the city to the east to be more loyalist, because if it feels more like militaristic, this can be completely wrong, but I feel like off the top of my head, I feel as the sort of person who's willing to become a soldier would loyalists be seen me closer. Yeah, like so. Yeah, I think just because I've got this idea in my head that like the sort of person who would become a soldier, who would join the military to protect the kingdom, right, is more like patriotic in a way, right? And that might be because they're really pro. They grew up listening to stories of how the human kingdom conquered the world and stuff, and they wanted to be a part of that, so they became a soldier. And so we could have this city be resided over by like a general, and that general, while he takes his orders from the Senate, is very pro kingdom. So our east is, and like if you disagree, jump in. But the one to the west. Yeah, smaller Senate militia settlements. Like the Senate don't need as much military to keep that area safe because of its strategic location, right? So, like you've got this idea in your head that the Senate are like more cunning and stuff, because that's just sort of natural behaviour, and like that kind of plays into the idea of them being able to look after that smaller area with less troops and stuff, which we're just making it up, but it just fits quite nicely. So city to the east is governed. I don't know why I'm putting military. The military general, as opposed to just a general guy who is still quite loyal to the royal. The Senate, from the Sente, the Senate, and the West. Like it feels natural for it to be like, with it being close to the desert as well. Just I've got this like very kind of Middle Eastern like trade hub, kind of like a real melting pot of society, and like the city exists as like a plaza for trading, and everyone who lives there is in some way like involved in like the merchant lifestyle, and that plays into like the kind of free thinking like Senate way of, just as an offshoot. Well, welcome to the chat. Place the king. I'm going in order. That's the place the kingdom don't give two shits about and believe it's just barren. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the desert's the desert, right? I was trying to think of reasons why the Senate would gain power initially. What if it was set up by the king's child who was born to oppress people? That's why they broke from the crown. Yeah, so like we have a potential heir to the throne who is just a man or woman, a person of the people. Yeah, right. Flair. Can I have a phonetic spelling of Ric Flair, please? It's because I'm reading it as Reich Flair, and I want to make sure I'm getting it right. Is why I'm 100% in on the name. I just want to know that when I'm saying it, I'm saying it correctly. Yeah, he would rely on single. He believes enough in himself that one man can win a war, and that's why he's lost his kingdom. The Pepe Badlands. No. Six Northwest is a mercantile metropolis. Full of free thinking artisans and stuff. Yeah, like, it's just that kind of like liberal. It's a liberal. A liberal wildland, right? Just like many, like not many, but like an unfavourable amount of senators have come from this kind of area. It's not like they're half, but like the more than their fair share of senators are from here, right? A larger than larger than average portion hail from. And where's the? So where are we going? The Senate was originally proposed by we could have him like so the king believed that because he was implanting his son into the Senate that he would ultimately always have control over it, and it's just like got well out of hand, but he doesn't realise it. Proposed one of the kings who believed that his family's presence because he's just like he's coming across as really arrogant as this king, right? He just believed that if his son's part of it, he would maintain control of it forever. His family's presence within the Senate would ensure the monarchies hello. Thank you very much for following. Very much appreciated. Monarchies control. And thank you for joining. Boom. There we go. Monarchies control over. Yeah. Articulate. Where oh my no flight interesting combat. I think you are I think I'm pronouncing it right. I'm guessing. Right Flair. Just right Flair, right? That's a shout. Like David Flair, the first suggested it to Reich Flair, the third, that he doesn't have time for the other places, so should palm it off from the other people. Yeah, like that miserable place that's close to the desert, right? Let some of those guys decide what happens in the impoverished towns like Sunnybridge. This storyline that I've been watching, if this storyline, Rupert, would have you playing D&D every week, then what are we but a success, right? That's I'm inclined to say this, right? But I think what we've written is actually quite would be quite an entertaining D&D campaign, right? And we've done it in 4 hours, which didn't. If we were sat in a room together and not working through this medium, would probably have taken an hour, right? And it's something that I'm really keen to get across in this stream, and that's why I'm really grateful for all of you who take part and show up every week and bring it. See, it's mine. You're helping me make something special. I want people to come away from this feeling as though there's no reason why they couldn't DM, because it really is. It's so much easier than it's been stigmatized to be, in my opinion. I feel like people expect a lot out of a DM, and people believe that for them to DM would require a lot out of them, and it really doesn't. I've been having fun, and I hope you've been having fun creating this world. And what we've got is very serviceable. And I will run this campaign at Mighty Lancer Games. Shout out! I'm going to be running this campaign when it's finished for people. I'm going to set up an evening where we play, and we're going to have like 4 to 6 players come and play the campaign, and hopefully they enjoy it as much as we've enjoyed making it. But the purpose of this, like, as I said, I want to get better at DMing. I want to DM more frequently, and I want other people to DM as well. I'm not saying within our social group, because I love DMing and I'll always do it. I mean, just in general, I want people to be able to watch this and think, like, this really isn't that hard. You don't need to be Tolkien you don't need to be George Martin to create your own world. It doesn't have to be a New York Times best-selling novel. It just needs to be fun, and we can take the mick and call our king Reich Flair and like use every trope under the sun to populate the world and what have you. It really doesn't matter as long as the players ultimately who are playing the game are having fun. So again, thank you all for being a part of that. He's referred to his soldiers as the Third Reich. I did not intentionally, when I called in the third of his name, that was not intentional. But that's fine. That's fine. Actually, it should be a daughter of Reich and become. And because he's a raging bigot, coupled with his disdain towards the rest of the country, he just bins it off on Charlotte Flair. Charlotte Flair. And makes it all implode on itself because she's a woman. Wow. See, that's the kind of thing that, like, King's Children. So that's the kind of thing that, like, you're getting into, and I know we're just having fun, right? You're getting into so much detail there that, like, we don't need that much detail. But it's interesting for you to know that, because members of society, like your NPCs, the more intelligent ones who have grand thoughts about politics and things, would have had these ideas themselves. That I think he put his daughter into the Senate because he wanted it to fail, because he's a bit of a sexist, is that bloke. And we don't have to confirm or deny to our players whether that's true, but it just creates that, like, you have that reaction with your players where people will go, "Don't like that guy," right? If we don't want them to like him, we can add that. It doesn't have to be true, but it also doesn't have to not be true, right? So we're putting it in, right? Charlotte Flair. If there's a takeaway I have from this, it's that I've gone from thinking, lol, I've never DM'd, thinking I could actually defo give it a go. That warms my heart. Yeah, like, and just you thinking that is a great success. Great success, right? Like, you don't have to do it if you decide ultimately that you don't have the time, or you don't want to, or whatever, or you can't get a group together, which is the normal, not being able to get people to commit to a date and stuff. But the fact that you're even considering it now is like genuinely heartwarming, because that's what I want. That's what I'm hoping to achieve, is to create a world where more people are willing to DM, so that more people get to play Dungeons and Dragons, because it's a great game. And that, I believe, if you're all happy with that, I believe is a great sentiment to end today's stream on. We've covered a lot of ground today, which I was slightly worried after last week, because we kind of, like, time just went so fast, and we kind of just managed to scrape by at the end by, like, getting our Pantheon done. But we've come so far today. I feel like we're at a point now where we're all sort of agreed that we've got, like, an interesting world to write a story in. And I think what I want to do next week is just very briefly look at notable characters. That's sort of what I would do next, right? We've got we've been touching on it as we go, but we've created a society and we've got a couple of notable characters within it, but it's going to help us further down the line to like have established a little bit more. Like I've mentioned a general who resides over this city, and maybe we should like give him like a little bit of flesh and what have you. And then again, getting closer to Sunnybrid, we're going to want to create like a few notable characters to inhabit the town. And we're going for it, and we're going for like an innkeeper and stuff. The important characters that people are going to meet at the start of the campaign. So it would be really good, I think, not just to cover that and create a couple, but like I'm going to get some Magic the Gathering cards and stuff and show like a little bit more detail for people who do DM. Show them what my process is for creating NPCs, because it works for me. It might work for you. It doesn't have to, but just to show a bit more detail about how I do that, because I want to educate or like provide people with more insight into how to do things like that. So if I show you how I do it, then we can session 3 teas at same time, same place, 6 p.m. next Sunday. I would be extremely grateful for your company again, and once again, from the bottom of my heart, would like to say thank you. Thank you for participating this week, and I will see you all next week.